I have a question for the Olam. Simple question. If the Torah is meant to be teaching us how to live, if the Torah is meant to be telling us instructions for life, how to live like a Yid, what to do, how to do it, when to do it, that's what the Torah is. Torah Lashon Hora. That's what the whole Torah is, basically telling us what to do and how to live like a Yid. So I have a kasha for the Olam. If that's true, so why doesn't the Torah tell us to have good midas? Why is there nowhere in the Torah that it says in a very clear and explicit way, have good midas? We don't find such a thing. And by the way, this is not my kasha. Reb Chaim Vital asks the kasha in Shari Kedusha, why does the Torah not instruct us to have good midas? Be a good person. Be a good human being. Be a good Jew. Do the right thing. Why? Nowhere do we find such a thing. So Chaim Vital explains, of course we know the famous saying, Derech Eretz Kodma LaTorah, but he explains it in a very extensive way, that good midas is a prerequisite for the Torah. That means Torah was given to the man. A man is someone that acts like a man, who acts like a human being. And therefore, before any of the mitzvahs of the Torah are even said, we have something called Sefer Bereshis. It's an amazing, amazing thing. Sefer Bereshis, by the way, has got another name, and that is Sefer HaYashar. The Sefer, the book of the straight. You read the stories in Sefer Bereshis, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It's mind-boggling. When you see how they lived, what they did, how they did it, it teaches you how to live like a Yid. And only then do you have the mitzvahs. Rav Shach Zatzal asked a famous question. Why are there only 3 mitzvahs in the entire Sefer Bereshis? The entire Sefer Bereshis, 3 mitzvahs. Now we know there's Tariag mitzvahs, 613 mitzvahs. 3 of them are in Sefer Bereshis, not Parshas Bereshis, Sefer Bereshis. Huh? Come on. Beginning of the Torah. Tell us about what we have to do, how to do it, what to do, when to do it, how to live. Rav Shach asked the kasha. And yet, the other 4 svarim, starting from, of course, Shemois all the way until Devarim, mitzvahs asay, mitzvahs lo asay, left, right, and center. Of course, some parashas more than others, but why Sefer Bereshis, the entire Sefer Bereshis, Noach, Lech Lecha, go on and on, all the way. 3 mitzvahs, that's it. Zog Rav Shach, because the beginning of the Torah Sefer Bereshis is teaching us not what to do. That we'll learn later. Sefer Bereshis is teaching us how to live like a Yid. And I saw a beautiful idea in a story, and I want to share this with the Olam. I had another idea what to give Shirin this morning, and the emissaries on the way to Yeshiva this morning. I decided, you know what? I need to say this to the Olam. I found this beautiful idea, this Dvar Torah, this story, brought down in a Gavaldiga Sefer from Rabbi Yaakov Bender Shlita, Rosh Yeshiva of Darchei in Far Rockaway, an unbelievable Sefer. And he writes this Dvar Torah in the story, and I'm going to share it with the Olam. He says, I'll give you an example. He says, look at this week's parasha. I don't know if you we've been giving Shir and Shnai Mikras. I'm assuming the Olam already are holding, in Shlishi Revi, somewhere along the lines over there. So, Baruch Hashem, I have the schos to learn Chumash with one of the very choshev Bachrim, and we spent 15 minutes on Posuk Aleph. Then we spent another 15 minutes on Posuk Beis. So we're holding by Posuk Gimel. We spent half an hour so far. So I want to read you just Posuk Aleph, Vayera Elov Hashem. Okay, this is an example. You can go through the whole Sefer Bereshis, but one example, this week's Parsha, first Pasuk. Vayera Elov Hashem be'eloi nei mamrei. V'hu yoshev Pesach ha'oyel k'choim hayom. We all know the story. We grew up with the Maisa Avram Avinu. The day after the Bris Milah, it's boiling hot outside. He's waiting for guests. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want to bring him guests because he's going to trouble him. Eventually, the 3 malachim, each one has their own mission. We know the whole story. It's an unbelievable thing. How many words are there in the very first pasuk in this parasha? 11 words. In these 11 words, there's no halachas, no mitzvahs that are brought over here whatsoever, But every single word in this pasuk contains midas tovus. It's unreal. Okay, and Rabbi Yaakov Bender Shlita points this out in a beautiful way. He starts like this. Let's just stop number one. And each of these ways are showing us how to emulate the Rabbeinu Shalom. How can we become more godly? How can we become more like the Rabbeinu Shalom? So he starts. Vayera Elov Hashem. Hashem appeared to Avram. Why? Why did Hashem appear to Avram? To mavakeh cholim. To do a mitzvah, bikeh cholim. Now, how many chesed organizations have come out from those few words because HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed what needs to be done? Someone's sick, you go visit him. How many organizations around the world that are bikeh cholim, food, chesed, whatever it is around the world, just from those three psukim? And then it continues as well. What happened? Where was Avram? Ba'elonei Mamre. Why was he there? And why was the Torah telling us that? You look at Rashi, the Mefarshim, Hakoras HaTov to Mamre for giving him the advice for taking a bris milah. Hakoras HaTov. Wow, that's a very important thing. How could you live without Hakoras HaTov? A yid without Hakoras HaTov, Hashem Yirachim. Hakoras HaTov is to have the appreciation, the gratitude, not only to the Rabbeinu Shalom Avada, but to everybody else around us. To have gratitude of Hakoras HaTov. That is that's the greatest and far foremost of all midas tovus that we have. Then it continues, Rabbi say. Why was it hot? It was hot because the Rabbeinu Shalom didn't want to matruach Avram Avinu to do what? Hachnos Orchim. Avram Avinu is desperate for guests. I want to help people. I want to give them food. I want to invite them in my home. Again, a midah that we have to realize. Look out for other people. Help other people. What can we do for another yid? Rabbi say 11 words in the beginning of this week's parsha. No halachas, no mitzvahs, but one thing. Derech Eretz. How to live like a yid. How to live like a Jewish person that thinks of other people, that cares of other people, has good midas, intrinsically good character traits. That's what the Torah is telling us. That's Sefer Bereshis. So before we have all of the mitzvahs that a mitzvah Shem are coming up in future Svarim, throughout the year we'll hear about them. First thing, live like a good human being. That's what the Rabban Shem wants. That's the first message of the Torah. The Torah is a lesson for our lives, and every pasuk and every word of the Torah teaches us how to live like a Jew. I want to tell you a story that he shares also. Mordechai Maisa. We'll end with this. Such a gewaltige Maisa. He says the Rosh Hashiva of Beis Medrash Elyon, Rav Reuven Grozovsky Zatzal, when he became sick, he was an elderly man, Echad Magdolei Ador, Kol HaTorah Kulei Baal Peh, unbelievable tzaddik. He was very, very ill at the end of his life. He got a stroke nebuch. He couldn't move much. He needed help with basic movements, basic things that we do on a regular basis but don't appreciate them. He needed help. Even getting up out of his bed, getting dressed in the morning, Nagel Vasa, putting on his tefillin, was difficult for him. So they made a rotation in the yeshiva of Bochum to go and help the Rosh Yeshiva in the morning, get dressed, put on Nagel Vasa, wash Nagel Vasa, put on his tefillin, and then leave him to go daven, whatever he had to do. And every single day there was another boy that went to do it. One day, a particular boy it was his turn. Now he was a new boy to yeshiva. He hadn't really been there very long. And he was a little bit scared. He's going to the Rosh Yeshiva, an elderly man, a big tzaddik, and he has to wash his hands and he has to wrap tefillin around him. He was very, very nervous. But, what a covet, what an amazing opportunity to go serve the Rosh Yeshiva in that way. He did it. He goes over to the Rosh Yeshiva and he knocks on the door and the Rebbe said, so whatever. He starts to wash Nagel Vasa on the Rosh Yeshiva, and the Rosh Yeshiva's hands is trembling because he got a stroke and he couldn't move so much, and this Bocha Nebuch, this poor Bocha was nervous, but the nervousness of the boy and the shaking of the Rosh Yeshiva's hands, he ended up spilling the Nagel Vasa water all over the Rosh Yeshiva's clothing and over his bed. You can't imagine how humiliated, how embarrassed he was. How can you do that? You just made him soaking wet, his bed soaking wet, he felt terrible. But the Rosh Yeshiva said, don't worry, let's continue. He started to put tefillin on the Rosh Yeshiva, and then that was the minute you left. Once the Rosh Yeshiva had tefillin, talis and tefillin on, let the Rosh Yeshiva daven for the next 45 minutes, hour, whatever it is, and somebody else will come off and take his tefillin afterwards. As he was leaving, the Rosh Yeshiva called him over and started talking to him. Where you from? Which yeshiva were you in before? How's it going? Whatever, small talk, just general. And he answered him, of course, made him feel much better. And after a few minutes he left. Later on that day, the Bacha goes along and happens to tell one of his roommates or chavrusas, whatever it was, about his experience that morning. I can't believe I did it. I spilled the water all over the Rosh Yeshiva. Then he started talking to me, and the Bacha says, what? Yeah, he was asking me which yeshiva I came from. He asked me how it is. It made me feel really good. I was really happy. The Bacha's like, what? He spoke with his tefillin on? He's like, yeah, I mean, he was just talking to me regular. He never in all the years has spoken with his tefillin on. Never did the Rosh Yeshiva say a word with his tefillin on. But you know something? He understood that Bacha needed a little bit of encouragement. That Bacha needed to feel good at that moment. So yes, perhaps he had a halacha or a minig, whatever, not to speak with his tefillin on, which is a beautiful thing. And we should all try to do that and emulate that. But he understood, not at the expense of somebody else. Not at the expense of somebody else's feelings. So yes, it's a choshev thing not to speak with your tefillin on, and we should all try to do that. But in a situation where it's going to help somebody else, where somebody else is going to feel good, then the Rosh Yeshiva understood, I'll take my minig, I'll push it to the side, and I'll help another yid. By the way, that Bacha became Rabbi Yisrael Belsky Zatzal. Godel Ador in Kol HaTorah Kulei and in Midas as well. And where did he learn it from? He learned it right there from that Maisa from his Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Say, the Torah is telling us the most amazing message, every single word, every single pasuk. Live like a yid. Think about somebody else. Good midas is something that's a prerequisite before all of the mitzvahs, before all of the commandments in the Torah that we're going to get. First and foremost, live like a yid, and the yid has good midas. Shkoyach.